It's all happening at the Politicrat Daily Podcast online store, and you can go there right now at the-politicrat.myshopify.com. Lots of good new items, brand new, designed by yours truly. So please head to the Politicrat Daily Podcast online store now. Thank you very much. Welcome to the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Wednesday, March the 31st, 2021. On this edition of the Politicrat, Day 2 of testimony in the Derek Chauvin trial, the murder trial that Derek Chauvin, the defendant, is having in Minneapolis, in the Hennepin County Court. I'm going to tell you why the outlook is not good for the family of George Floyd and for those of us in the world who care about justice, truth, and punishment when wrong is done. I'll let you in on my thoughts on this right after this. James Newton Howard. He is really a tremendous composer. I really do enjoy that piece of music. It's called Bloodstain, by the way. Gosh, I play it. My goodness gracious me. It's kind of the apropos, I suppose, given the subject matter. Bloodstain from the soundtrack Grand Canyon, as in the natural landmark in Arizona, Grand Canyon. That is a film, by the way, that you really should see. I did an audio commentary on the film just a few days ago, posted on YouTube at Popcorn REEL. If you type up Popcorn REEL in the search engine on YouTube, you will find all the videos that I have done. Most recently, the feature-length audio commentary for that film, Grand Canyon. Of course, unofficial, but, if you're someone who's a fan of film, then you will want to listen to that audio commentary. Anyway, James Newton Howard there, the composer, with Bloodstain. And, again, apropos, sadly, because of the subject matter of this episode, and it's not going to be happy listening, I'm afraid. Because I'm going to be honest with you, as I always am. I've always been honest and forthright with people and with you. And I want to thank you for listening to me and listening to this podcast. I think this is a testament to your loyalty that you continue to listen. Whether you agree, whether you don't agree, whatever it might be, there's no requirement that says that anybody listening has to agree. There's no requirement that says that. But as we sit here together on the last day of the month of March 2021, isn't that incredible that we are already at the end of the first quarter of 2021? March just vanished like a hot knife through butter. It really disappeared. Staggering that we have now hit the final day of not only the month, but of the first quarter of the year. 3 months have already passed by in 2021. This is the final day of that 3 months. Let's let that sink in for a moment. Dear listener, though, I really do want to tell you why I am very concerned about this trial. And I bet you are too in many ways. I think there are people, I would suspect, if I could be so presumptuous, who might think that the deal is done and that Derek Chauvin, who all of the world before God or Allah or Yahweh or any God you pray or don't pray to, saw murder George Floyd, is somehow going to walk and walk and walk. There are people who think that. There are people who think, no, he's going to be found guilty of something. He may not be found guilty of unintentional second-degree murder. I'll address that again in just a few moments. But he will get something. That's what some people are saying on Twitter. And I did a poll at the Popcorn REEL. I did several polls on Tuesday about this on my Twitter handle at the Popcorn REEL. And I asked those of you on Twitter whom engaged, thank you very much, whether or not you thought that Derek Chauvin, who killed, murdered, executed, tortured to death George Floyd over 9.5 minutes, whether you thought he, Derek Chauvin, was going to walk, whether you thought he would be convicted of something, or whether you thought that he would be convicted on all charges. And the responses were, I thought, quite interesting. I was actually surprised by the responses to that Twitter poll question. I honestly did not expect the Twitterati to decide as they did. Now, the poll is still open as of the recording of this episode, but if you so happened to be inclined, maybe you might want to, if you so happen to be inclined, participate in this poll. I'm just surprised at this, because maybe by the time you listen to this podcast episode, the poll may have closed. But because it's a 24-hour poll, I was very much surprised by some of the Twitterati and their response, your responses to the poll question. The exact question was, do you think the defendant will be A, convicted on all charges, B, acquitted of all charges, and C, convicted on something? Now, this is what the responses were based upon those three options. And this is as of the time I'm recording this, so this well could have changed by the time you take a look at the poll, or maybe it may not have changed very much at all. But I do want to inform you that of the three choices, 33% said that they thought that Derek Chauvin would be convicted on all charges. 14% said they thought that he would be acquitted of all charges. And a whopping 53% said that he would be convicted of something, on some kind of charge. 53%. Now, excuse me, dear listener, but I am of the mind that history and the reality of such history, being as it is for black people in the United States of America for well over 400 years now, if not just slightly, just about 400 years, or so, has shown me, demonstrated to me, instructed me that there is no way that Derek Chauvin, the defendant in this murder trial, is going to be convicted. Not of anything, not of all things, of absolutely nothing. Dear listener, if you look at the long history of the United States, which is not that long, but if you look back beyond 1776 and look back to 1619 when it was not called the United States, but when you just look back, when was there ever real justice for black people in this country? And if there was, it is justice that we had to fight for and die for. I mean, that's how it's happened in this country. Whenever black people have won something in this country, it's not because of the benevolence of the white power structure. It's not because of that. It's because we fought and sweat and bled and died for it. I don't think that there's any mystery about that. I am not telling you something that you don't already know, dear listener. I mean, I know you know this. Of course you know this. So it is to my surprise, and of course Twitter, it's a highly unscientific exercise to put out a poll. You never know who it is who is responding. You don't know if they're bots. You don't know if they're trolls. You don't know if they're one person with 3 different accounts. You have no clue, right? You don't have any clue whatsoever about who's voting on these things. But I was really stunned to see that 53% of people in a state called Minnesota, especially, now they're not all from Minnesota, the people who voted, I'm sure of that, but, well, pretty much. But I'm thinking, do you know the history of Minnesota and their police? Oh my God, do you know the history of police, period, in this country when it comes to black people? The police were born out of the slave patrol, the enslavement patrol, more like it, where the police would listen to me. They would absolutely chase black people who had escaped from enslavement and bondage. And then they would be summarily executed, or if not executed, dealt with severely, short of death. Maybe have some accoutrement cut off, maybe have some kind of scarring or branding, so that they could be identified. I mean, there are all kinds of evil things that white male enslavement owners did. Owners of black people as property did. And the penalty would often be death. I don't know if the people who responded to my poll knew anything about that or not. I'm sure that some people know that the police in the United States came about through enslavement patrols, and there were no police in this country for a good bit of time until the 1800s, probably in the mid to late 1800s, and that had again been born out of the enslavement patrols. That's where the word officer comes from. It's a derivative of overseer. Overseer, officer, overseer, officer. It's a derivative of that. Overseeing the neighborhood, overseeing the black people that you've enslaved. Overseeing, policing. Policy, policing. I mean, anyway. I'm telling you. So I am surprised by the optimism. And look, I could be wrong. I could be very wrong, dear listener. I could be very wrong indeed. But I'm going to tell you right now, before any further ado transpires as to why it is I think that this case is going to end horribly. And it's going to end, in my view, with the defendant in the case walking, not getting convicted of anything. First of all, the very start, even before we get to jury selection and everything else, the fact that, and I talked about this a couple of episodes ago, the fact that Derek Chauvin, the most severe, and I put that word severe in quotes, the most severe charge that he is facing, that he's charged with, is second-degree unintentional murder. Now, I talked about that on Sunday's episode a couple of days ago now, or 3 days ago now. So you know that what I had to say about that. And I'm not going to repeat it here, but you know what I said on Sunday about this. So that right there is a problem off the top. And I know there's certain things that happened in this case, and the Minnesota Attorney General, Keith Ellison, and this, that, and the other, and blah, 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 blah. So there's that. Then even before that, there was this press conference last year with the Hennepin County DA's office, and it was the Hennepin County. I want to give people this background because I know some people have forgotten this. Remember that press conference? I'm not going to play it here because I just don't want to waste your time. But it can be found on YouTube. There was an absurd press conference literally a few days after George Floyd had been tortured to death. And it literally happened, I think, the same week of the torture of George Floyd. It was maybe a Friday or the following Monday or Tuesday or whatever after Memorial Day last year. And there was this bizarre press conference, the Hennepin County DA's office. They were making all these excuses. It was as if they were blaming George Floyd. There were these weird things being said by the Hennepin County DA. We come to find out that he is a bag of garbage, and there's a lot of underhanded BS from him. He doesn't prosecute cases. He doesn't get strong with charges when black people are the ones victimized. Nothing. White male DA who's been a bunch of trouble in Minneapolis. You can ask anybody that lives there who is black who knows, and some black and white people I'm sure know as well, that this Hennepin County DA, and I forget his name, is a bunch of trouble. And that he said he was going to prosecute this. We're looking at a charge of third degree a murder or whatever. And we were all sitting here. Don't you remember this from a year ago, dear listener? Weren't we all sitting here around the country of the United States and even beyond? Sitting here wondering now, why the hell is this guy talking about, well, we're going to do third degree murder? And we're not going to look at first degree? We're not going to look at second? We're looking at third? The weakest charge of the lot? And so remember what happened a few short days after that. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, he being a progressive, said, we're going to come in here and take over this case. I'm going to prosecute this thing, or I'm going to, do the investigation and blah, blah, blah. And the Hennepin County DA stepped aside for that to happen. And it was taken out of his jurisdiction. The charging was taken out of his jurisdiction, and the almost said Michigan, the Minnesota Attorney General, Keith Ellison, did his investigation, announced the charges. He got the second degree murder charge. And we still wondered, well, what about the first degree murder charge? Why didn't he get that? We all saw that damn videotape. We all saw it. We all saw it. All the world before God saw this videotape. Some of it, all of it, bits of it, parts of it, freeze frames of it, slow-mos of it, stills of it, photos of it. We all saw it, every single one, all over the world. This may well have been the most watched video in the history of video, in the history of the world. I cannot think of a piece of video, not even the Zapruder film, has been watched as often as this snuff film torture death tape of the defendant absolutely executing and torturing George Floyd. I don't think there's any piece of video ever submitted to the human ether on planet Earth that has been viewed as much times as this one. It's the most traumatic and awful thing. 9.5 minutes of this. It was played yesterday. Again. Derek Chauvin has his knee in George Floyd's neck, even after the paramedics get there, and the paramedics don't even tell him to get his knee off. He's still there with the paramedics in full view, just standing there, arranging the gurney for him. I mean, that goes to tell you the system is so entrenched. This is systemic violence, you know. This is state violence. It is state-run violence. And it's disgusting. So I get to the charge situation and only second-degree murder. And unintentional. Not intentional, unintentional. Ding, 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 ding. Alarm bell number 2. Alarm bell number 1 was, okay, the Hennepin County DA is saying third-degree murder. Really? That's alarm bell number 1. Alarm bell number 2 is second-degree murder, but second-degree unintentional. Not intentional, but unintentional. And forgive me, I don't know all the details of the Minnesota law when it comes to the degrees of murder and the charging there. But I know enough to know that first-degree murder should have been charged here. Anybody who's, well, anyway, I've gone through that. You heard the episode, some of you, from Sunday. So that's alarm bell number 2. No first-degree murder / second-degree unintentional. Then I'm going to bring this directly to this trial. After the jury selection, which lasted, 3.5 weeks or so, then we got to this trial. Day number 1. Day number 1. The feed just goes out. Now, things happen. I get it. But why when Donald, thinking of Daniel, the song from Elton John. Why when Donald Williams is testifying does this audio and this picture suddenly disappear? I don't know. Look, this could have been completely coincidental or not. It could have been a white person testifying. It could have been a Martian testifying. And the feed could have gone out then. But it didn't. It went out when the prosecution's heretofore most compelling witness was testifying on the stand in front of the jury. And somehow or other, the judge did not know that the feed had been cut to the families. Now, the families could be plural. It could be George Floyd's family and also the family of Derek Chauvin, the defendant. But I guarantee you they're probably not both in the same room together watching, for obvious reasons. And it was only until about maybe 5 or 6 minutes, and I had to switch because someone on Twitter was very kind to tell me that the feed on Court TV had not expired. But on C-SPAN 2, which, by the way, has produced some excellent coverage. Excellent coverage. Really good. I like what C-SPAN 2 does. No pundits to annoy you. No one weighing in. It's just pretty much straight down the middle. And yes, there's a call-in and all that happens, and they show repeats of the call-ins and Washington Journal and all, and some of the wackadoodle callers who are very, well, I don't want to go into that because then that would be really insulting of me to do that to you and to them. But the point I'm making here is that the feed went out, and that was interesting to me. You had a trial that was being beamed all over the world. Every last country is broadcasting this trial, Come on now. More countries are broadcasting this trial than will be broadcasting the Oscars next month. You think I'm kidding? I know over 200 countries are broadcasting the Oscars live, but even more countries are broadcasting this trial live. Live, I say. And streaming it. It's on TV. It's on your other TVs, as I so fondly put it. This trial is reaching more countries than the trial of the 4 white officers, those defendants who beat Rodney King almost to death, than the whole O.J. Simpson trial that happened and the slow-speed Bronco chase and that whole year-long trial, than the whole Clinton harassment situation with Monica Lewinsky, than, these impeachment trials. This trial of the defendant, Derek Chauvin, who we all saw absolutely execute George Floyd, is being televised in far more countries. I'm telling you, and I am telling you. So with that in mind, how on earth, Judge Peter Cahill, could you not have thought of a backup generator in the event that a power surge would happen and that the families would not get to see the feed in their respective rooms adjacent to the courtroom, and that maybe a few million people in the United States and certainly beyond might be shut out of the proceedings for 5, 10, 15 minutes? Why didn't you think of that? That strikes me as really strange. So that's another thing that kind of my radar goes up. Now, to you, dear listener, this may not be anything of anything. It may be completely trivial. It may be fluff. It may be, shit happens. It may be anything as far as you can see. You may have a more sanguine outlook than I. And of course you're entitled to it, as am I, entitled to my perspective on this. We will view things differently. But I just want to enumerate to you, dear listener, these things. And I don't want to take any break right now because I want to go through this unbroken, uninterrupted. That may be number 3 or number 4 that kind of raised an eyebrow with me. The feed going out. As it did. So Donald Williams, who was the most compelling witness on Monday, had to come back yesterday to continue his testimony. So the effect of what he had in the courtroom, even though the jury was there in the room and they didn't lose any feed because they're right there, right? So it wasn't an issue for the jury, but it is an issue for the world or some of the world who was watching. And I just think that that's just strange that this feed would go like this. Did we ever find out what was said? Those of us who did watch court TV, was there anything that you noticed in terms of what Donald Williams had to say on Monday that produced any kind of interest to you? I wasn't watching court TV. I only switched over when someone, thank you, I think her name was Tracy. Thank you, Tracy. And I thanked her on Twitter already for this. Was so kind as to respond and say, well, court TV is still up. So this didn't affect everybody. But I just find that feed thing interesting. And then yesterday when Donald Williams, who I think was very good again yesterday, and I still say he's the best witness thus far that the prosecution have produced for their case against the defendant, Derek Chauvin. And yesterday, the idiot boy, defense attorney, aka shit for brains. Excuse me, but this is just ridiculous, this defense attorney. I know he has a job to do. And what his job to do, dear listener, is to frustrate, to get people pissed off. I think it's working. To get people upset, to disrupt the witnesses, and make sure that their composure is destroyed just enough so that the jury can look askance at these witnesses for the prosecution and say, wait a minute, these are a bunch of hotheads. How can you trust them? They're so angry. Oh, and you know what they say about that angry black man. And that was the narrative, the racist narrative that the idiot boy, who I think is absolutely incompetent. How the hell did he get his law degree? From the School of Racism, I know. But how did he get that law degree? I mean, did somebody take his bar exam for him? Because, I'm sorry, this guy is one of the worst trial attorneys I've seen. Seriously. And look, I'm an attorney. I am not a specialist in criminal law, but I've interned at law firms that practice criminal law. And I can tell you that, my goodness me, this guy is horrible. He is awful. And he's got no real legal skill at all in terms of the way he builds a foundation for his cases. And when he does try to build one, the questions he asks in order to build that foundation are absurd. They are absolutely absurd. The strategy of the defense is to get these witnesses to lose their cool because the defense has nothing. They don't have anything. They have nothing. They have nothing. And this is why you're getting the kind of garbage and the racist behavior and the racist mind traps, the seduction traps for white viewers and white jurors who might go, yeah, maybe, yeah. And that part of their brain, some of those white people, lights up and, well, here's a rationalization for why I can acquit the defendant, Derek Chauvin. Appeal to the racism. That's what politicians do. Appeal to a white person's racist behavior and thoughts to get votes. And what this defense attorney is doing for the defendant is the very same thing. Oh, he was angry. He was scary. When you have a mixed martial arts fight, well, isn't it possible that when you choke someone out, they can come to and continue to fight? It's what he asked Donald Williams yesterday. That gem of a defense attorney there, Eric Nelson. It might as well be Eric Half Nelson, because you should have put him in a half Nelson or a full Nelson, Donald Williams, since you are a wrestler and a mixed martial arts fighter. A full Nelson might have exactly been what Eric Nelson needed. Because that line of questioning yesterday was an absolute travesty. It's the kind of thing that, good, if I had my way, I'd bring him up before the bar. I know you can't yank someone's bar license based on stupidity, but my goodness me. The Razzie Award for lousy lawyering has got to go to Eric Nelson, doesn't it? After the shit show you saw these first 2 days. Gee, Willy Willikers, man. This guy has no freaking clue. And what school did he graduate from? Asshat Law School? Was that the one? This guy, it was an absolute disgrace. And this is what adds to my concerns. This lawyer is so bad, not because I'm not concerned because of the murderer, defendant, Derek Chauvin. That's not why I'm concerned with this lawyer. I'm concerned that this is such a bad lawyer. It almost seems set up. Almost seems like we haven't seen this movie before. It seems destined that this guy's going to walk, doesn't it? Now, dear listener, I have not perhaps offered anything compelling for you at the minute. But I'm going to continue here for the next few minutes, and then I'll take a break. The next thing that really troubles me, dear listener, is the failure of the prosecution to object in a timely enough manner to the line of questioning that half Nelson, half Wit, the defense attorney, half Wit, is engaging in. So the line of questioning that he engaged in with several witnesses yesterday went on for a good 10 seconds, 15 seconds, before finally you'd hear, "Objection, Your Honor." And could you have a more passionless objection before a jury? Several times it was so lackadaisical. I could barely hear the objection. I'm not asking him to get up in a bullhorn, Matthew Frank. Jerry Blackwell. Aaron Etteridge. Or whomever. I'm not asking you to shout through a megaphone, but Mike, for the love of God, man. For God's sake, man, get up and say, "Objection." You've got to wake the jury up. We've had 2 days of this trial. We're into the third day. And I'm sorry, where's the pulse? There is no pulse right now. I was very much bullish on day one. I thought that the prosecution were very pro forma. And I even said to you, dear listener, that I didn't see why they had to really go out with this fire and brimstone opening statement. But now the trial has really begun. And I'm sorry, you cannot let Halfwit keep asking his drivel and let him continue so that the jury hears this garbage. And then you finally object? The cat's out the bag. The jurors have already heard it. Objection, sustained. And then the judge sustains it. It's too late. We've already heard it. The jury's already heard it. And they cannot unhear it. They cannot put that genie back in the bottle. It doesn't happen. Even in Aladdin, it doesn't happen in Aladdin either, to the best of my memory. You can email the podcast at politicratpod@gmail.com to tell me if I'm wrong about Aladdin and the genie not being put back in the bottle. It's been a long time since I saw Aladdin. And I'm not talking about the Robert Williams version. But look, all jokes aside here, seriously, because this is not a joking matter, dear listeners, you know. A family is waiting for justice. George Floyd's family, waiting for justice to see this defendant be put under the prison That's what we're waiting for. And the fact that this prosecution did not timely enough object, at least as fast as I would like it, man, by the time that syllable walks out of full Nelson or half-wit Nelson's mouth, those prosecutors are going to be jumping. Objection, as if someone stuck a pin in their ass and they jumped from their seats. That is how it's got to be. The world is watching. Where's your urgency? Where is it? So that's my concern as well. There's a lack of urgency. Look, they're procedurally very good, I think, the prosecution, but it's these objections is one problem, I think. Now, that may be changing, that may not. I didn't like it today. Today is probably going to be more of the same, but I didn't like it yesterday. I didn't like it the day before, but particularly yesterday. I really was not happy on Tuesday with the lateness of these objections. And not only that, another reason for my concern about this whole trial and where I think it's going and why I think it's going there is that the Judge Cahill, was objecting for the defense attorney. I kid you not. He was objecting for them. Objection. And then you'd hear the defense attorney go, "Oh, yes, Your Honor, I was going to say." What kind of garbage is that? Why is a judge doing the objection for the defense attorney before the defense attorney even does it himself, half-wit Nelson? How is that happening? And why? And why is it happening at all? I really do smell a rat, dear listener. I smell a rat. How on earth is that supposed to happen? What trial have you ever heard of where the judge frequently chimes in with the objections before the defense attorney does? It may have happened once. It may have happened one time ever, or two, in the movies. In the movies, that's where I've heard this before. My Cousin Vinny. Can we start there? We don't have to go back to Kill a Mockingbird 30 years earlier. We can go to My Cousin Vinny, I think in 1992 or 1993. To Kill a Mockingbird was 62, I think, or 63, thereabouts. You don't have to go back to 1962 or 63. You can go back to 1992 or 93. My Cousin Vinny. Remember the judge, Fred Gwynne, God rest his soul. Objection. He would object. Is that where Judge Peter Cahill has been spending his nights? Watching My Cousin Vinny? I mean, it's a damn funny movie. But this, dear listener, is no laughing matter. Also, no laughing matter is this whole situation with the minors who testified. Now, having said that, it's not that the minors are a problem. And the minors testified yesterday. Now, they were minors at the time of Derek Chauvin executing George Floyd. They were minors at that time. And the rules in Minnesota, and I think this is maybe true of all states, but certainly in Minnesota, is if you are or were a minor, I should say, at the time of the crime, or if you're a minor now at the time you testify, if you were a minor at the time a crime was committed and you are brought into court to testify, you cannot have your name disclosed in a proceeding that is televised or recorded for public consumption. It's got to be protected, it's got to be shielded, and if the cameras are on, as they are here, you cannot have the cameras put any display at all of the minors testifying. So there were 4 people today, all of them female, I think, who testified, or yesterday, oh goodness gracious. Getting my days mixed up. This is not good. Today is Wednesday. And yesterday was Tuesday. It's simple, Omar. I know, it's called getting older. Yesterday, 4 minors testified. Not M-I-N-E-R-S, M-I-N-O-R-S. And as in under the age of 18. And some of them had just turned 18 or were going to turn 18 next week or something of the other. But they were all minors, M-I-N-O-R-S, last year on May 25th, 2020, when Derek Chauvin executed George Floyd. And all 4 of these individuals testified to actually being within 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 feet from the murder. I think one of the minors may have been across the street, but pretty much all of them were right there. And they were all of them were videotaping. And there was such a big thing about, well, we cannot show the minors testifying. That's part of the law here in Minnesota. We don't allow the minors to be on camera. We want to protect their privacy. They are of tender years, if you will, for lack of a better term. Geez, that is such, isn't that so kind of pedophilia talk of tender years? I mean, even that shows you what kind of patriarchy we're living in. Of tender years? That sounds like some pedophile talking. Ugh. But anyway, I'm telling you. So there was all this thing about, well, we can't have them on camera. We're not going to show them. And we're going to block the audio out. We all agreed to it. Both sides. We all agreed to this. We stipulate that we're not going to have their last name. Their first name may be heard occasionally, but their last name we're not going to air. So we'll just audio bleep that out. And so you here in the courtroom, the jury, you'll get to hear this, but no one else around the world will. And perhaps not the families in the adjacent rooms either. So the bottom line is that, okay, we didn't see the faces of these minors as they testified yesterday, but we heard their names. We definitely heard their names. First name, and I think in one case, the last name. And not only that, here's the problem. That's not the problem. The real problem is that there were moments where these minors were asked to circle photo exhibits to identify themselves in those photographs that were exhibits before the court and the jury. And you know what? Those were shown on television to the whole wide world. The whole wide world got to see the photo exhibits. And not only that, they got to see the circling of the very person who they weren't supposed to see at all testifying. I mean, I'm so excited. I almost lost my voice. I did lose my voice just then. So to recap, dear listener, the minor who you didn't see actually giving live testimony circled an exhibit that you did see that was a photograph of themselves 10 months ago. Really good job you did there, Judge. Oh my, you did a bang-up job there, Judge Cahill. Oh, you're such a smart guy. Now, what is the efficacy, dear listener? And I asked this question on Twitter a couple of times yesterday at the Popcorn REEL. And I said, why? If you are not showing the minors testifying live in the courtroom, are you showing the exhibits with photographs of them that they are circling to identify themselves? Why are you allowing that, Judge Cahill? That is a huge problem. And you can add that to the list, dear listener, of the problems that I have enumerated here for this trial. This judge is a problem. And I say that because I do not like how he's running this case thus far. You know what the other thing is that I didn't like? Now, it's not his fault, but this whole thing with cameras, there was a woman, young black woman, young sister, who had a cell phone, and apparently she had been caught taking photos inside the courtroom. You know, dear listener, if you've ever been inside a courtroom, you are not allowed to take pictures with anything. A nail clipper, a nail file, a secret camera. You're not allowed to take photos of anything in a courtroom. I'm telling you, in England, they don't allow you to bring a cell phone. Let me just say it like this. Let me just correct that. In the Old Bailey in the Royal Court of London, you are not allowed in the Old Bailey in the Crown Court. You are not allowed to bring a cell phone inside that court. Not just inside the courtroom, inside the building. When you approach the entrance to get yourself in off the street, you are not allowed a cell phone in there. Because if you bring a cell phone in there, and because they search you, and if you have a cell phone, they will tell you, sorry, you can't come in. Sorry, governor. And you have to leave and go all the way home. Or if you're not living in London, back to your hotel room, drop off your phone and come back. How come I said it like that? I'm not kidding. You're not allowed in the Royal Court of London and the Old Bailey. You're not allowed to bring a phone in. And there are other courts where you are allowed to bring a phone in, but you cannot take pictures. You will be summarily tossed in. You'll have to delete the pictures or whatever it is. I've gone to the United Kingdom Supreme Court. You bring your phone in. They check your phone. You get scanned in. And, you're not supposed to do that. And the only time you're allowed to take pictures in there is if you get permission, or if the actual courthouse is you're there and it's an empty court. So if there's an empty courtroom and there's nothing going on, you are allowed to take pictures. And usually it's the security guard who takes those pictures, or someone who works there who takes it in an empty court, not during when court is in session in any particular courtroom. So this struck me wrong as well yesterday. This particular woman had taken a cell phone picture apparently, and the judge is there admonishing her and, I'll let you off this time. And, well, I didn't know, I wasn't aware. And maybe that was true. Maybe she's honestly not aware of that, which strikes me as strange, because how could you think you could take photos of, well, anyway, that's just weird. How could you take... There's a jury in there. See, this is the other thing. Again, are you now following my train of thought here, dear listener? Are you now following why I think this thing is for the birds, mate? I totally think this guy's walking. He's going to walk, as Al Pacino would say. Do my Al Pacino impression. From Heat, the 1995 movie, starring Al Pacino and Robert De Niro and Val Kilmer, and Dennis Haysbert and Michael T. Williamson and Ashley Judd and John Voight, and I can go on and on and on, and Wes Studi and Trejo and Danny Trejo and everybody. I can go down the list. Directed by Michael Mann. Great movie, by the way. 1995. Do you want me to read you the entire credit list? Listen, again, let's get serious here. I think this guy's walking. And I still haven't got to everything that I want to tell you about. I'm almost there. But that whole thing with the woman who's taking a photo, there's a jury in there. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? You take a picture of a courtroom, a live courtroom with jurors in it. What could possibly go wrong there, dear listener? What could possibly go wrong? And not only that, he said to her, did Judge Peter Cahill, who, by the way, is a close friend and a confidant and alliance, a friend of the Senator Klobuchar. They came up at around the same time, we were told by Greta Brunner of C-SPAN early yesterday. And that gave me pause too, before I get back to the cell phone thing. That gave me pause too, because everybody in Minnesota, in Hennepin County, knows, everyone black and white knows, they know that Amy Klobuchar was mud at that Hennepin County District Attorney's office. She's absolute mud. She absolutely was. They were black victims that did not get appropriately looked after, situations like that. There was undercharging. There was all kinds of stuff. She absolutely didn't do her job right. It was horrible, the kinds of stuff that was going on. She prosecuted people who were innocent. There's a brother sitting in jail right now in that damn county who still today says he's innocent. He's been in prison for 20 years. Nearly 20 years now. And he said he's going to do the time until they find who did it to that young black girl that was murdered. I think she was 6 years old. And, of course, Amy Klobuchar became Hennepin County District Attorney off of that case where she railroaded this young brother and then did ads. Oh, we fight for all victims, including a 6-year-old girl who was killed. And she mentions her name in the ad. You can find the ad on YouTube. I'm not going to put it in the liner notes. I'm not going to. And so when I heard Greta Brunner, who is a good, she's good. She's really good. I like what she does on C-SPAN. Really good. And Greta Brunner, who oddly enough a few weeks ago mentioned the age of the delegate and representative of the House, Stacey Plaskett of the Virgin Islands. Why would she mention her age in the middle of a broadcast? I have no idea. It sounds awfully sexist to me, but there you have it. I'm still going to get back to the cell phone thing. I haven't forgotten. But what strikes me, dear listener, is that Amy Klobuchar was absolute doo-doo, caca, dung, as Hennepin County District Attorney. She had a horrible reputation. Horrible. And if you don't believe me, go watch The View. And Sunny Hostin ripped her ass a new one last year. Oh my God, that would I would in fact I would love to put that in the liner notes. I don't know. I'm still thinking about whether I should. That clip is gold. When Sunny Hostin said, "You're a powerful woman. Why aren't you doing something about these cases?" Oh, Sunny, I'm with you. Sunny ripped her. I'm not going to curse too much. I've already, I think, done that these last few episodes, if not tonight's episode or last night's episode or what day is it today? I don't know. I mean, this is COVID brain, isn't it? It's really COVID brain. Come on now. I mean, I know enough to say that it's the last day of the month, but I don't know enough to say what day it is. Oh my God. Anyway, Sunny Hostin ripped her ass a new one. A new one. Seriously. And I may just put that in the liner notes. You got to see that video in case you haven't. I think many of you know to which video I refer. Sunny Hostin just went, I love that. That was one of the only people I remember who really held Klobuchar's feet to the fire. And Klobuchar was on the short list to become VP. And she knew that after the execution of George Floyd, her chances of becoming Joe Biden's VP were dust. And then she bows out magnanimously under the guise of magnanimity, if I can say it properly, which I probably just didn't. Magnanimity. Whatever. I give in. I give up. But under that guise, I'm dropping out. And James Clyburn had told her to drop out, had said she should drop out, and others did too. And you had many black women, at least 4, who had written to the Washington Post soon thereafter saying, we need a black woman as a vice president. And thank goodness Joe Biden listened. But Amy Klobuchar, Senator Klobuchar, that is to you and me, was a disaster. Everybody in Minnesota knows it. Minneapolis knows it. She was a disaster as DA. And to hear that this judge, Peter Cahill, is someone who came up with her and he has ties to her. And when I heard that from Greta Brunner yesterday, I shook my head and I said, we are in trouble. I said to myself, Minneapolis, we have a problem. But back to the cell phone video, to the cell phone pictures. So Judge Cahill tells the woman to delete the video, to delete the picture. And do you know that when he gave the phone back to her, she just took the phone and walked away? He didn't make her, or let me say it like this. He didn't say, Miss, I want you to delete it right here in front of me. He said, please delete the photo. Here's your phone. And there's no evidence that she deleted it. At least I haven't seen that. I watched this thing and she took the phone back and you never know for a fact that she deleted it. Why didn't she do it in front of him? Why did he give the phone back to her and then tell her to do it? And he said, well, I want you to recall everywhere where you've posted this. I want you to recall it. In other words, so if you put it on social media, I want you to take it off. Wherever you've posted this, I want you to recall it. That means, delete it. And you know that in life, nothing is truly deleted. At least that's what they say. They say. And so that's another thing that gives me pause about this whole damn trial. I am not optimistic. And 400 plus years of history in this country vis-a-vis black people tells me that. And so does common sense, or at least so does logic and facts. That was so weird. I'm telling you, this is not right. I'm telling you right now, this is not going to end well. If I'm wrong, I want you to tell me. I will be the first, though, to come out and do my mea culpas. I'll put out a video. I'll do this. I'll do that. Heck, I'll put a t-shirt. Well, no, I won't do a t-shirt saying I was wrong. The Politicrat Daily Podcast store does not do those kinds of t-shirts. But I will do a mea culpa. I'll do a mea culpa on this here podcast. Yours truly will do that if I turn out to be wrong. And you are rooting for me to be as wrong as the day is long. In fact, I'm rooting for me to be as wrong as the day is long. But you know what, dear listener? I have a sneaky feeling, as I dare say do some of you, that I am not wrong and that you are not wrong either. Because there are too many things already in these first days of this here trial that are not sitting right with me and are not sitting well. I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it. How on earth is someone taking photos inside a courtroom with a blooming jury there? And then you give the phone back to her and you tell her to delete it, and you didn't have her delete them in your presence? You didn't ask her, okay, where's the delete function? Show me. And have her do it right there? This is not right, folks. And I don't know if anybody else is picking up on these kinds of things that I have enumerated, but this is fishy. It stinks to high heaven. I'm telling you right now, I do not see this trial ending well. And I think that we are going to have a situation where Derek Chauvin walks. And I'm not talking he's going to get third degree. I'm not talking he's going to get manslaughter, voluntary manslaughter, I think that is. I'm not talking any of it. I think he's walking. Sorry, I'm just, listen, I hate to tell you. I'm only telling you. I think he's walking. And I'm telling you, you probably think he's walking too. Not the 53% of you on Twitter who responded to my poll. But let me tell you, I think this guy's walking. I do not like what I'm seeing. I would be happy to be wrong. If something happens today that shows me otherwise, then maybe I'll start to think differently. But the other thing that also really gave me pause was when I heard at least one prosecutor referring to the defendant in this case as Mr. Chauvin. Mr. Chauvin? This guy murdered George Floyd. And you're calling him Mr. Chauvin like he's a bloomin' chauffeur? And what the hell is this? Mr. Chauvin. Oh, Mr. Chauvin, I've got a room for you on the second penthouse here. If you'd like to come upstairs, we will give you an invitation to the Gold Club, and you can purchase yourself some fine champagne and wine. And on our balcony here, you can get to see a view of all of Minneapolis, the downtown part. What is this? Mr. Chauvin? I'm not called Mr. Nothing when, if I, God forbid, ever became if you ever became they wouldn't call you Mr. or Ms. whatever your last name is. They'd call you defendant. And on the day of May the 25th, 2020, the defendant over here. Can you identify the defendant for me, please? Do you see the defendant in this room? Can you point to him? And I hear prosecutors. These are prosecutors. Telling you. Oh, Mr. Chauvin. I couldn't believe. What is that? This guy murdered somebody. He murdered George Floyd. You're calling him Mr. Chauvin. They call me Mr. Tibbs. I mean, what? I just do not understand. I'm telling you, this guy's walking. And don't tell me I didn't warn you. He's walking, folks. You heard it here first. Maybe you heard it here last. This guy is walking. You've got prosecutors calling this guy Mr. Chauvin? Let my black ass be on trial. Let's see if they call me Mr. Moore. I think they'll call me a whole lot worse. And I think they'll call me defendant, like they call us when we are sitting in that seat. Prosecutor ain't gonna call me Mr. Moore. This is just, I'm telling you, that really raised, I'm like, what? Why are they calling him Mr. Chauvin? In fact, it was one prosecutor yesterday, I keep saying, yesterday, Tuesday, There's one prosecutor yesterday who said it, or maybe two, and then I believe on Monday as well, some prosecutor said it. No, he's defendant. He's the defendant. He's the defendant. Is this some kind of Minnesota nice thing that I don't know about? Is that why they're calling him Mr. Chauvin? Because it's a Minnesota nice thing? Or is it because they believe in giving a title to a murderer that's polite? Is that the Minnesota nice thing? I don't get this. See, I've never lived in Minnesota or Minneapolis. Maybe you have. For those of you who have, can you drop me a line at politicratpod@gmail.com and explain why you think they are calling him? These are the prosecutors calling the murderer defendant, Mr. Chauvin, as opposed to defendant, the defendant. Look at the language. I keep talking about language over and over and over again on this podcast. I'm telling you, I am really telling you, the language that's being used. I didn't even get to Genevieve Hanson, the firefighter, and the mini verbal brawl that broke out between Judge Cahill and her. When this fool, half Nelson, half wit, defense attorney was asking the most absurd questions of her, she lost her cool, which she shouldn't have done. And that, as I told you earlier, that was the goal. And she fell for the bait. Look, I can't blame anyone for losing their cool. This is an extremely painful event, to say the very least. Extremely traumatic to even watch this. So you can imagine Genevieve Hanson, the firefighter, and Donald Williams, the mixed martial arts fighter, instructor, security guard. They were all there watching, both of them, and the minors that testified. They were all 5 to 10 feet away from George Floyd, who was completely tortured there right before their eyes. They videoed the darn thing. Guy was handcuffed. Oh, and Donald, what do you think, Donald Williams? Do you think that mixed martial arts, if a guy's been choked out, do you think they could possibly revive themselves and come back and fight back? Oh, Christ. Oh, yeah. So George Floyd with handcuffs on. You want this jury to think that George Floyd with handcuffs on, after being choked to death, is going to magically wake up, break out of his handcuffs and fight back, or fight back while he's in handcuffs? This is not the Green Mile. This is insulting. And I'm telling you, the fix is in. Period. Don't say I didn't warn you. If I'm wrong, I'll be happy to be wrong. And I'll sit here for 5-10 minutes on whatever episode it's going to be and give my mea culpas. But that verbal back and forth between the judge and Genevieve Hanson, I was just trying to finish my answer. Look, I'll tell you when your answer's finished. This is a judge. I'll tell you when your answer is finished. Oh, well, okay. That's what she said. Okay. Popped off back at him. It was not a good look. Luckily, the jury was out of the room. But still, that was not a good look. I'm telling you, I think the prosecution's losing points here. I think the prosecution is losing points. I'm telling you. And she now has to come back. And she will be testifying today. Just like Donald Williams testified over 2 days. The flow was broken. I thought Genevieve Hanson was good. I think she was very good. I think that Donald Williams was better because he composed himself better. And I think that he provided a lot of really visceral and strong information, as did Genevieve Hanson. I keep saying Hanson. But I think this kind of combative, I'm answering the question, I was finishing my answer, I don't think that played well for that jury, because the jury did see those moments where she said, I'm trying to finish my answer. And you know how juries are, and you know how jurors are. They're sexist, right? Jurors are sexist and racist. And jurors are going to look at a woman, I'm telling you, answering back and saying, let me finish my answer, to a man, the male dipshit attorney for the defendant. Or as the prosecutors would say, for Mr. Chauvin. Car ready, Mr. Chauvin. Is your car ready, Mr. Chauvin? Oh, here are the keys, sir. Don't forget to wipe the blood off your hands. This is just incredible to me. But not incredible, because this is what happens. This has been happening for 400 years. And I'm telling you now, all of that back and forth was not good today. And I know some people on Twitter are saying, yes, Genevieve Hudson. Goodness gracious me, if I had $10 for every time I've said her last name wrong. Genevieve Hansen, I think hurt herself there with that exchange, with those exchanges with the dip crap lawyer who, baited her, and he was successful in getting under her skin. Which I can understand that, look, she saw this stuff firsthand. She was trying to save the man's life. She was shouting at the murderer to look at a pulse, administer a pulse. He never so much as looked up at her. And even when the guy was dead, he still had his knee in his neck. Even when the paramedics were there, I'm telling you, this is not going to end well for the family of George Floyd. I'm telling you. I am telling you. And again, I didn't like that. That back and forth, even when the jury wasn't there, was not good for the witness. And the judge is going to note that. You can't get into it with the judge. She was given back to the judge. Give him back to the judge. I don't care how wrong that judge is. And he is wrong. And I don't like the way he's been conducting some of this stuff in the courtroom. I don't like it. But I'm sorry, you cannot be popping off back at the judge. However wrong he is, you can't do it. You can't do it. So that's why I don't think that Genevieve Hansen was the best witness. Even though she did have some really strong, powerful things to say, the emotions were there. And I talked about emotions a bit on Twitter at the Popcorn REEL and explained some very interesting things I felt about the way we're talking about this and the way even including myself are talking about this or tweeting about it, about emotions and what we expect of black men in particular, and also, quite frankly, of any woman of any race. But we don't say the same thing for white men like Brett Kavanaugh, who scream and shout at United States senators like Amy Klobuchar back in 2018. In far less traumatic circumstances. Oh, the U.S. Supreme Court seat that he was up for. Remember when he shouted and screamed and sparred and was combative with Senator Amy Klobuchar? Does that name ring a bell? Remember that? Talking about, well, was your father an alcoholic? Do you drink? I mean, that's what the bloomin' Supreme Court nominee was asking the questioner, the senator from Minnesota, at his Supreme Court hearing. Go look it up if you don't believe me. I would not steer you wrong, dear listener. I would not steer you wrong. But, Brett Kavanaugh can shout and scream at women, at senators. He can jump on top of women in college and hold them down and assault them and molest them and jump all over them. And hey, he gets on the Supreme Court, You know. But Genevieve Hansen. By the time I finish talking about her, her name will be Hudson. It's just, why am I saying Hudson all the time? Maybe I'm thinking of the Hudson River. I'm thinking of New York. But I got to tell you, this is not good. This isn't good. And as poor as this judge has been, you can't get into it like that with the judge. And the jury did see when she said to the Half Nelson defense attorney that I want to finish my answer. I haven't finished. And that was not good. And look, I know she's a young, not that that should matter, but she said what her age was. I know she's under 30 years old, but I still don't think that that's an excuse. I mentioned her age. I didn't say her exact age. But the point is that you've got to be composed. You know, that's the thing about this whole thing. You have to try to strip emotion out of something that is damn right is emotional. It's powerful. And that's what this whole system is. You've got to pretend your emotions don't friggin' exist, right? To see that a 9.5 minute snuff tape, more than 9.5 minutes because the tape ran longer than that. The video ran long. He sat on him for, the defendant sat on George Floyd for 9.5 minutes. I mean, it's a snuff movie, honestly. Except there are no actors here. There's an executioner and then his buddy who's standing there like a blooming sentry and an executioner. Get back on the sidewalk. That dude has to go down. He's got to go under the prison. Officer Tao has got to be convicted when he gets put on trial. He's got to be. This guy was the one that stood there, and there's the guy that stood watch and made sure that no woman could get in to stop their fellow female from being raped. That's the guy. That's Tao. That's the guy that stood there, who stood there and made sure that no one could stop the defendant from killing George Floyd. I mean, that's what Tao is. He's a piece of garbage, like Derek Chauvin is a piece of garbage. And I want to know, when do you think the system is possibly going to hold itself accountable? That's another reason why this guy's walking. When do you think the system's going to ever prosecute itself and hold itself accountable and convict itself? Really? Pull the other one. Thank you very much for listening to this edition of the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore.